Charlie was no ordinary dog, a scruffy, medium-sized mutt with a coat that seemed to be a patchwork of every possible shade of brown. He had a knack for getting into trouble. His owner, Sarah, loved him dearly, but she couldn't understand why. He kept escaping every night. Every morning, like clockwork, Charlie would return, wagging his tail as if nothing had happened. Sarah had tried everything to keep him inside, locking the doors, reinforcing the fence, even setting up a baby gate. But somehow, Charlie always found a way out. One night, Sarah decided she had had enough. She was going to follow Charlie and find out where he was going. She waited until the house was quiet, and then she heard the familiar sound of Charlie's paws padding across the floor. She peeked out from her bedroom door and saw him nudge the back door open with his nose. How did he do that? She had locked it. Sarah grabbed her coat and slipped on her shoes, careful not to make a sound. She followed Charlie out into the cool night air, her heart pounding with a mix of curiosity and worry. The moon was full, casting a silvery glow over the neighborhood. Charlie trotted along confidently, his tail held high, as if he had a destination in mind. Chapter 2. The journey begins. Sarah followed Charlie through the quiet streets, keeping a safe distance so as not to alert him. She was amazed at how purposeful he seemed. He wasn't just wandering aimlessly, he was on a mission. They passed by the park, where the swings creaked in the breeze, and then turned down a narrow alleyway that Sarah had never noticed before. The alley was dark, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and old bricks. Charlie's pace quickened, and Sarah had to jog to keep up. She was beginning to regret her decision to follow him. What if he led her somewhere dangerous? But she couldn't turn back now. She had to know where he was going. The alley opened up into a small, hidden courtyard. In the center of the courtyard was an old, gnarled tree with twisted branches that reached out like skeletal fingers. Charlie stopped at the base of the tree and looked around as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Sarah ducked behind a stack of crates, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Charlie began to dig at the base of the tree, his paws moving furiously. Sarah watched in amazement as he uncovered a small wooden box. He nosed it open, and inside was a strange, glowing object. It was a collar, but unlike any collar Sarah had ever seen. It was made of a shimmering, silvery material, and it pulsed with a soft, golden light. Charlie picked up the collar in his mouth and turned to leave. Sarah's heart was racing. What was that collar? Where had it come from? And why did Charlie have it? Chapter 3. The collar's secret. Sarah followed Charlie back through the alley, her mind spinning with questions. She had to know more about the collar. When they reached the park, Charlie stopped and sat down, the collar still clutched in his mouth. Sarah hesitated, then stepped out from her hiding place. "Charlie," she called softly. Charlie's ears perked up and he turned to look at her. For a moment he seemed surprised, but then he wagged his tail and trotted over to her. He dropped the collar at her feet and looked up at her with his big brown eyes. Sarah picked up the collar and examined it. It was warm to the touch, and the golden light seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. She turned it over in her hands, looking for any clues as to where it had come from. There were no tags, no markings of any kind, just the strange, shimmering material. "Where did you get this, Charlie?" she asked. Charlie barked softly, as if trying to tell her something. But of course, she couldn't understand him. She sighed and slipped the collar into her pocket. She would have to figure this out on her own. Chapter 4. The Legend of the Midnight Collar. The next day, Sarah decided to do some research. She went to the local library and searched through old books and newspapers, looking for any mention of a glowing collar. At first, she found nothing. But then, in an old, dusty book of local legends, she found a story that made her blood run cold. The legend spoke of a magical collar that had been created by an ancient civilization. The collar was said to grant its wearer the ability to travel between worlds, but it came with a price. The wearer would be bound to the collar, and if they ever tried to remove it, they would be trapped in the other world forever. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the story. Could this be the same collar that Charlie had found? And if so, what did it mean for him? Was he in danger? She rushed home, her mind racing. She had to talk to Charlie, had to find out what he knew, but when she got home, Charlie was gone. The back door was open, and there was no sign of him. Chapter 5. The Other World. Sarah's heart sank. She had to find Charlie before it was too late. She grabbed the collar from her pocket and stared at it. If the legend was true, then the collar was the key to finding him. But how did it work? She slipped the collar around her neck and closed her eyes. At first, nothing happened, but then she felt a strange sensation, as if she were being pulled in all directions at once. The world around her seemed to dissolve, and she was surrounded by a swirling golden light. When the light faded, Sarah found herself in a strange, otherworldly landscape. The sky was a deep, swirling purple, and the ground was covered in a thick, misty fog. In the distance, she could see a towering castle made of black stone, its spires reaching up into the sky. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized where she was. This was the other world, the world that the collar had taken her to, and somewhere in this world, Charlie was waiting for her. Chapter 6. The Castle of Shadows. Sarah made her way toward the castle, her footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The fog clung to her legs, making it difficult to see where she was going. As she approached the castle, she noticed that the air was getting colder, and a sense of dread began to creep over her. The castle gates were open, and Sarah stepped inside. The interior was dark and foreboding, with tall arched ceilings and walls lined with ancient tapestries. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and Sarah could hear the faint sound of whispering voices. She followed the voices, her heart pounding. In her chest, the voices led her to a large, ornate door at the end of a long hallway. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was filled with strange, glowing orbs that floated in the air, casting an eerie light over everything. In the center of the room was a large stone pedestal, and on the pedestal was a figure that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was Charlie, but he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a tall, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. The figure turned to look at Sarah, and she felt a wave of fear wash over her. "Welcome, Sarah," the figure said, its voice echoing through the room. "I've been expecting you." Chapter 7. The Shadow King. Sarah's heart raced as she stared at the shadowy figure. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The figure stepped forward, revealing a tall, imposing man dressed in a long, black cloak. His face was pale and gaunt, with sharp features and piercing red eyes. He smiled, revealing a set of sharp-pointed teeth. "I am the Shadow King," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "And you, my dear, have something that belongs to me." Sarah's hand instinctively went to the collar around her neck. "You mean this?" The Shadow King's eyes gleamed with hunger. "Yes, the Midnight Collar. It is a powerful artifact, one that I have been searching for centuries. And now, thanks to your little dog, it is finally within my grasp." Sarah's eyes darted to Charlie, who was lying on the pedestal, his eyes closed. He looked so peaceful, as if he were sleeping. But Sarah knew better. The Shadow King had done something to him. "What have you done to Charlie?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger. The Shadow King chuckled. "Oh, don't worry, my dear. Your little dog is quite safe, for now. But if you want him back, you'll have to give me the collar." Sarah's mind raced. She couldn't give the collar to the Shadow King. If the legend was true, then the collar was the only thing keeping her and Charlie from being trapped in this world forever. But if she didn't give it to him, what would he do to Charlie? Chapter. Then the bargain. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. If I give you the collar, will you let Charlie go? The Shadow King's smile widened. Of course, my dear. I have no need for a mere dog. It is the collar I desire. Sarah hesitated. She didn't trust the Shadow King, but she didn't see any other way to save Charlie. She slowly reached up and unclasped the collar from her neck. The golden light pulsed brighter, as if it knew what was about to happen. Very good, the Shadow King said, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Now, hand it over. Sarah took a step forward, holding the collar out in front of her. But just as she was about to hand it to the Shadow King, Charlie's eyes snapped open. Sarah, no! Charlie barked, his voice clear and strong. Sarah froze, her heart pounding. Charlie, you can talk? Charlie jumped down from the pedestal and stood between Sarah and the Shadow King. Don't give him the collar, Sarah. He'll use it to destroy both worlds. The Shadow King's face twisted in anger. Silence, you miserable mutt, he snarled, raising his hand. A bolt of dark energy shot from his fingers, aimed straight at Charlie. No! Sarah screamed, diving in front of Charlie. The bolt of energy hit her square in the chest, and she felt a searing pain as she was thrown backward. Chapter 9. The power of the collar Sarah landed hard on the stone floor. The wind knocked out of her. She gasped for breath, her vision swimming. The collar, still clutched in her hand, began to glow brighter and brighter, until the entire room was filled with a blinding golden light. The Shadow King let out a roar of anger, shielding his eyes from the light. What is this? What have you done? Sarah felt a surge of energy coursing through her body. The pain in her chest faded, replaced by a warm, comforting sensation. She stood up, holding the collar high above her head. I don't know what's happening, she said, her voice steady and strong, but I'm not going to let you hurt Charlie or anyone else. The golden light from the collar began to spread, filling the room and driving back the shadows. The Shadow King let out a scream of rage as the light enveloped him, dissolving his form into nothingness. When the light finally faded, the room was silent. The Shadow King was gone, and the orbs that had been floating in the air had disappeared. The only sound was the soft panting of Charlie, who was standing by Sarah's side. Sarah, Charlie said, his voice filled with awe. You did it! You defeated the Shadow King! Sarah looked down at the collar in her hand. It was no longer glowing, but she could still feel its power, pulsing softly against her skin. I don't understand, she said. How did I do that? Charlie nuzzled her hand. The collar chose you, Sarah. It recognized your courage and your love. That's why it gave you its power. Sarah knelt down and wrapped her arms around Charlie, holding him tightly. I was so scared, she whispered. I thought I was going to lose you. Charlie licked her face. You'll never lose me, Sarah. I'll always be by your side. Chapter 10. The return Sarah and Charlie made their way back through the castle, the air now clear and free of the oppressive darkness that had filled it before. As they stepped outside, the misty fog had lifted, revealing a beautiful, starry sky. Sarah held the collar in her hand, feeling its warmth. What do we do now? She asked. Charlie looked up at her. We go home, he said simply. Sarah nodded. She slipped the collar around her neck and closed her eyes. Once again, she felt the strange sensation of being pulled in all directions, and the world around her dissolved into golden light. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her own backyard, the familiar sights and sounds of her neighborhood surrounding her. Charlie was by her side, wagging his tail happily. Sarah knelt down and hugged him tightly. I'm so glad you're safe, she said. Charlie licked her face. Me too, Sarah. Me too. Chapter 11. a new beginning. The next few days were a blur for Sarah. She couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The other world, the Shadow King, the collar, it all felt like a dream. But the collar was still around her neck, a constant reminder that it had been real. She decided to keep the collar, at least for now. She didn't fully understand its power, but she knew that it had chosen her for a reason, and she wasn't going to let it fall into the wrong hands. Charlie, meanwhile, seemed back to his old self. He no longer tried to escape at night, and he seemed content to stay by Sarah's side. But Sarah could tell that he was different. There was a new intelligence in his eyes, a wisdom that hadn't been there before. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah turned to Charlie. "Do you think we'll ever go back?" she asked. Charlie looked up at her, his eyes filled with warmth. "If we need to, we will," he said. "But for now, I think we're right where we're supposed to be." Sarah smiled and reached down to scratch behind his ears. "You're right, Charlie. We're home." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the world, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever the future held, she knew that she and Charlie would face it together. Epilogue. The Guardian months passed, and life returned to normal for Sarah and Charlie. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure wasn't over. The collar still hung around her neck, a silent reminder of the power she now carried. One night, as she lay in bed, she felt a strange pull, a sensation that she had felt before. She sat up, her heart racing. Charlie, who was sleeping at the foot of her bed, lifted his head and looked at her. "It's time," he said simply. Sarah nodded. She knew what she had to do. She slipped out of bed and grabbed her coat. Charlie followed her as she made her way to the backyard. The air was cool, and the moon was full, casting a silvery light over everything. Sarah held the collar in her hand, feeling its warmth. She closed her eyes and focused on the pull, letting it guide her. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in her backyard. She was standing in a vast, open field, the sky above her filled with swirling colors. In the distance, she could see a group of figures approaching. As they drew closer, Sarah realized that they were animals, dogs, cats, birds, and other creatures, all of them glowing with a soft, golden light. At the front of the group was a large, majestic wolf with piercing blue eyes. The wolf stepped forward and bowed its head. "Welcome, Guardian," it said, its voice deep and resonant. "We have been waiting for you." Sarah's heart pounded as she realized what was happening. The collar had chosen her, not just to protect Charlie, but to protect all the creatures of the other world. She was the Guardian, Theone, who would stand between the worlds and keep the balance. She looked down at Charlie, who was standing by her side, his eyes filled with pride. "Are you ready?" she asked. Charlie nodded. "Always." Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to embrace her new role. The journey was far from over, but she knew that she and Charlie would face it together, as they always had. And as the golden light of the collar enveloped them, Sarah felt a sense of purpose and determination. She was the Guardian, and she would protect both worlds, no matter what.